So, Chef, really excited that you're able to come and join us this year at our RCA Conference this year in San Diego, April 15th, 16th, and 17th. And thanks for taking the time today to just do a little bit of Q&A. We want to get to know you, and we want to share a little bit about our organization if you got any questions for us. But really looking forward to just a quick dialogue and getting to know you and letting our members who will get to hear you speak the week of conference share a little bit in advance about who you are and how you've kind of risen to some very cool notoriety. So thank you for taking the time.
No, it's my pleasure is absolutely mine. Thank you for asking me.
So Francisco, and I hope you don't mind me calling you that.
No, that's fine.
Being in my mind one of the most comprehensive texts with Modernist Cuisine, especially focusing on the baking piece, how does it feel to be part of something like that? Did you realize it was going to be as accepted as it was going to be? I know on the heels of the first Modernist Cuisine, just tell me how it feels being on your side, looking at how the world is now receiving your text and the work you've done.
Well, I think for me, it's a huge honor and privilege to be a part of it. I mean, I think when the first set of books came out that focused on the science of cooking, I mean, obviously it was groundbreaking in so many ways, and it was one of those thoughts behind my head that, if they ever do something that revolves around the world of baking and pastry, I would give anything to be a part of that. But it also didn't seem like it was a ridiculous ambition to have, mostly because I have really tried to pay close attention as much as humanly possible to what happens to the science of baking and pastry, right? I mean, that was something that for me personally always was a way to improve things by understanding how things interacted with each other at that level. And obviously practice and execution, technique, etc. But understanding ingredient functionality and all that stuff always helped me explain things to students, how things were happening, why things were happening. But it also helped me improve whatever it is that I was working on. And so it felt like, I didn't know if Nathan, my boss, ever wanted to write such a text, but I thought, it would be a natural fit for both them and for me. And, how amazing would it be to be actually able to do that work? And so eventually I got a phone call from the people who were recruiting for this position. And it was obviously one of the, most well-received phone calls I've ever received in my life. But you also have to do the work, right? And so that part was, after all of the excitement of talking to Nathan and traveling out here to the lab and visiting with the people who worked here and so forth, eventually you have to show up and you have to do the work. And so that was what took us about 4 years, almost 5 on this bread project that we're immensely proud of. I mean, anything that takes that long to do, you better get it right, and at a pretty high cost as well. And so, but something that is, I mean, I'm hoping that the ultimate goal is that it's a tool that people can utilize to improve their knowledge on bread and their knowledge on baking, even if they're not bread bakers. It should be the first and last reference book you will need to understand the science of bread baking. So that is a long answer to a short question, but we tend to go long form on most things, and part of that is the answer to this question. So.
No, I appreciate that, and it's interesting because you get, you're at one stage of your career now where you have this comprehensive baking, bread baking text. Now, take me back to the beginning. Take me back to when you first realized that you had a passion for baking and how you've come this whole long way. What really got you started? I mean, it's great to be at this very big end, but it all starts somewhere.
Yeah, well, my initial, I guess, career was in obviously cooking, but in savory cooking. I was not formally trained in baking or pastry. It was a almost fortuitous, accidental, not accidental, because it wasn't something I had really planned on doing. It was the result of having moved to New York City, and I started working in a restaurant, and it was probably one of the most absolutely miserable jobs I ever had. And then looking for a way out of that job. And that's when I started to question if cooking, working on the line was something I really wanted to do in the savory line. And so I was looking for work, and back in those days, you still had to buy a newspaper. So I bought the New York Times for the wanted ads. And there was a position opening for a pastry cook at the River Cafe in Brooklyn. And, on my day off from my job, I went to stage at the River Cafe. And by the end of the shift, it was so much more of a natural pace for me, and everything made a lot more sense. And it wasn't this insane experience of, order, pickup, just that was something that I dreaded. It was something that it just clicked with me, and so they offered me the position of pastry cook that very evening. Of course, I had to give my notice at my other job, but once I started working in that kitchen, it's been that realm of baking and pastry ever since. Always with a foot in different things, because I don't want to say that I'm done with savory cooking. In fact, I can't. It's one of those things that has to be part of the whole package of what I do. But that's where I started really focusing and paying attention and just developing that knowledge and that experience in baking and pastry. And so ever since then, I've always strived to find better ways to do things, to find the most efficient way to produce a better product, and so on and so forth. And I think that, we're talking about this was 1998, so it's been a while since I've been on this. So.
Well, and I look at your experiences. You've worked at some of the most prestigious places. Places that I'm always amazed when I think about what the experience has been like working, at the French Laundry or Bouchon.
Right.
What is it about your food experience that still makes you say, wow? Like when you're cooking, between your experience with savory and in baking and the text writing, where are the times that you still stop and say, wow, I still love everything about this, and I'm always amazed. Like, what's that wow factor for you still in the food space?
It's very interesting, because the wow factor, like if you look for the wow factor on Instagram, it's always a pretty picture of something unusual. But I think that for me, the biggest wow factor is often in the process of making things, where the result might look exactly the same as when it's done in a different way. But I think for me, the catalyst of all of this was when I was taught a different way of making pastry cream, and this was in a research facility in Barcelona. It was actually founded by Ferran Adrià and a group of chefs, actually from the CIA. We spent a couple of weeks there, and they taught me a way that they had figured out of making pastry cream. And at that point, it was one of the things that I was teaching at the CIA. It was part of the curriculum of one of the classes I taught. At that point, I was also not a fan of pastry cream, because to me it was just like wallpaper paste. It didn't taste good. It was just like lumpy, disgusting, overcooked eggs. But something that you had to know and utilize, and some places use it, right? But they taught me a way that was very interesting, and it was 100% based on understanding ingredient functionality and when proteins coagulate and when starches gel, and what that exact temperature is and how to take advantage of that. And it produced the most amazing, delicious pastry cream I had ever had. That was a paradigm shift to me. That was the moment where I realized that I don't know everything, and that whatever it is that I know, I can do better, and I can change my mind again in 5 years, and I can learn a different way in 10 years, and there'll always be a different, better way to do things. And so that to me, that is the wow factor to me, is when you can come up with something that is like that, that innovates the process or innovates the final result of something, that to me is priceless. And it's the story I always tell to students and people who just want to go straight into doing the wow things and to doing, is this picture going to be cool on Instagram? Is it that? I guess that has its place, but the most important thing is things that have that real, absolute, tangible value of making things better.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's funny that you say that. I was just in a conversation on Friday with a coworker of mine, and we were discussing Escoffier liqueur, and it was kind of a random circumstance that came up. But just that idea that something was done by somebody who was a master at the time. And even as Escoffier said, it eventually technology is going to teach us things beyond what I understand and have in this text. And having that ability to come back and say, wow, it was a really great learning. This is why roux is the way it is and what it does. But being able to stop and say, all right, we have this product today that's still fundamentally based on what it used to be. What is it that using our knowledge and our technology now can get us to? And it's great to hear that you've taken that you've had that opportunity to find, especially with pastry cream, something that's so traditional, and really be able to learn through the science of it on how to make something that is much more desirable. And that sounds like a pretty cool wow factor.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and for that, it's also translated into other things that apparently are simple and boring, like eclairs. I mean, I don't want to spend an hour explaining to you what the process is of how to make a perfect eclair, but it was the result of that. It all started with that particular pastry cream, and it's all kind of like evolved into other things where it's this very classic stuff, like you said. I mean, if I think of, for example, the way that consommé is traditionally made and the way that was developed by Modernist Cuisine, it's still a consommé, but it's much more flavorful. It's much faster to do it. It takes advantage of understanding how ingredients are going to work with each other and what properties certain ingredients have to get the best out of them. And we have newer equipment. We have newer machines. I mean, we have digital thermometers now, which we didn't have, 60 years ago. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's kind of like a given now, right? That we have these tools at our hands, right? I mean, it's, speaking of the thermometer, I just want to, mention a very quick experience that I had in the jungle in the Amazons in a cocoa bean plantation, where the people who fermented the beans there, when somebody just gave them a simple thermometer to be able to control the fermentation of their beans, they were immediately able to produce a higher quality product and sell it at a better price just because of that one thermometer. They used to just do it by feel. And we kind of used to do things like that as well. I mean, these are things that we take for granted right now in the year 2020, but I think it's important to realize that we have some things that we have it a little bit easy, but also to take advantage of the fact that we have all these things to do better work, right?
Very cool. Yeah, it's amazing what we take for granted now. The things that, just being able to catalog information or being able to be very specific on time and temperature and understanding what's going on in an oven at any given time and controlling the moisture. It's, I imagine what it would be like going back, I'm going to use Escoffier again, like to sit down and have that conversation with him and talk about what we do now and even what his eyes would look like now and being able to ask questions. And, that actually brings a great question for you is, if you had that opportunity with all your knowledge to sit down with somebody throughout food history, or I guess just any history, who would you want to sit down with and say, I have questions for you, and here's the world that we've taken from where you've at, like from what famous person has done. Who would that person be? Like who would be really give you that kind of aha moment conversation?
I mean, I think it would have to be, for me, it's not always about the chefs, and I think I have a life very separate from cooking as well, which I think has helped me understand a bigger picture of not just food, but life in general. And for me, I would like to sit down with somebody like Pablo Picasso, for example. Not another chef, because, I don't think we speak the same language anymore. A chef that is already deceased, I don't know. It would, I literally think that we wouldn't be able to speak the same language even if we were looking at the same thing. But like I mentioned Pablo Picasso mostly because he is somebody who represents what I think we should be doing in cooking, which is this is a guy who was formally trained in a very classical art. And so he is somebody who was able to, or was rather, able to, draw a human figure perfectly, and, the lighting and the proportion and the structure and so forth. I mean, technically he was a master. And you wouldn't know it from his latest pictures and paintings because he transformed completely to a completely different style. But he had to have that classical foundation, that technical mastery before he started to think about how to evolve it and how to modernize it and how to change it and how to start thinking about it more critically. And this is something that happens, it should happen in every discipline, where we start to question things that we did in the past and how can we make them better? Because I'm also against innovation for the sake of innovation, right? I mean, there's things that technology doesn't make better, or certain technologies don't make better. And just to apply technology, like newer technologies, to those things, just for that sake, I don't understand it. I don't get that. For example, I'm going to go back to the pastry cream again, only because it's an easy example to pinpoint to. We talk a lot about sous vide and cooking and how it has improved, consistency in, certain restaurants that have struggled with that, or, when you have something that needs to be the same all the time, sous vide is kind of like a miracle thing. But if you try to do that with pastry cream, if you try to sous vide pastry cream, I mean, intellectually you could think, yes, if I hold it at this right temperature, everything's going to cook at the right temperature and it's going to be, ideal. The problem with that is that something like pastry cream needs to be stirred all the time. Otherwise, you're going to have something closer to a creme brulee. So again, it's that whole innovation part is something you have to think about whether it's necessary to apply or not. And I'm going to, repeat this, but that's why I think about Pablo Picasso frequently because of that, because it's that initial understanding of the basics and then how you evolve from there. And that is something that we really definitely have the tools to work with in the world of cooking.
It's interesting that you say that, and I appreciate that deviation there, especially going into the art realm. One of the groups that you'll find in the audience when you're speaking are students. We have education programs, so we'll have about somewhere between 50 to 100 students in the audience, and hearing that your perspective takes a very critical approach of just looking at how evolution and change needs to happen. What would be your one piece of coaching for those students about keeping your eyes open and thinking differently? What would be that thing you'd want them to walk away from listening to you with?
I think that what I think is extremely valuable is to always be paying attention, because that moment of, I hate to call it the aha moment, but there's no better way to put it, but the moment where you realize something new that you can test out, or a new idea, or something that could radically change something for the better, it doesn't come from one moment. It's an accumulated set of experiences from having observed many things, from paying attention, from reading, from studying, from keeping your eyes open and taking notes, that your brain kind of stitches those things together. It's on your subconscious, it's always working, right? And so in the realm of what it means to be a chef, what it means is that the more experiences you have with food, the more you cook, the more you taste, the more articles you read, the more news you hear about it, your mind is creating this map. And eventually you find ways to get to certain destinations. I mean, it's kind of like a metaphorical way to put it, but not terribly far apart from the reality of how great ideas happen. So it's, how does somebody become successful, just in general? Whether success doesn't always mean money, obviously, right? Success can mean many different things. But how does anybody become successful? It's a series of a bunch of little good things that happened, and doing a little bit of this, and it's an accumulation of small things that eventually lead to one very good big thing. it's not always that one moment that determines everything. It's an accumulation of experiences and work that you do that leads up to those moments of I guess brilliance. So I think that the takeaway is to pay as much attention and to really read and to study and to get out there and try to do as much work as possible and ask as many questions as possible. And there's many different paths to take, but I think a sure path to take is by being curious and asking a lot of questions and taking notes and paying attention.
Well, I'm very excited by what you just said there, and that's a lot of the messaging we're trying to give to our students and within our organization right now as we're evolving into our 25th year. Just that the world is about that experiential piece, and it's not just the food you eat, it's not just what you cook, but it's about how the world evolves around you. And I appreciate your honesty there and your sincerity there, because we're hoping, and this is something I look forward to, speaking of experiences, is having you come to our conference this year, and I hope that's a good experience for you as well, because that's what we're trying to teach both our peers, our older members, our new members, and our student members, is that your life is about experiential learning, and the only way to really be successful is to come with your eyes wide open. And so I appreciate your honesty on that. Well, good. Thanks. I'm sometimes honest. Aren't we all? I totally get that. But, we're coming up on conference here not too long from now. Is there, just kind of looking at our organization and coming in to speak, is there anything about the organization you're curious about? Anything you're looking forward to learning? Anything, I can address for you about, what we're going to be doing in April? Yes, I mean, I guess what is the objective of having this conference, and like, who is your average, what is your, I don't want to use the term customer because it doesn't imply, but what does your average attendee look like professionally? Yeah. Yep, our core members are either research and development chefs, so people who are working in food ingredient manufacturers or manufactured food chain accounts, things like that. The food scientists who support them, who are passionate about food and the culinary side of why food needs to taste and function in a very specific way. And then a more specific member who we call culinologists. They're products of our organization. They experientially through their career have gained a culinary background, a significant food science background, and they really live and embrace both sides of those that coin when they develop. And that's about 66%, 67% of our organization. And you'll meet a very rich group of people, with culinary being the reason why they work, but they do it from either the eyes of a more chef perspective or a more food science product development perspective. Okay. Well, good. I mean, that's our people. I mean, I think that there's very talented chefs that are extraordinary cooks who cook very well, and maybe they don't know why things work or how things happen, but they're just very good at cooking. And then there's a lot of food scientists that strictly understand food on a very, I guess, a very molecular scientific level, and don't have perhaps the understanding that a chef would have of food. And so when those two worlds come together, I think the results are extraordinary, because then it's like helping each other out, right? I mean, I think that there can only be a beneficial relationship between these two groups of people. It's almost like you have to have them speak the same language in order for things to happen. And I think it's great that this event is happening, because to me, that makes the better chef, and it makes the better food scientist, is when you understand the person across the aisle and what they're doing and how you can apply that to what you do. So that's great. I would love to frame that and put that up on the wall. Please, no, because really, we think of ourselves here in Modernist Cuisine as translators, right? I mean, it's the language of science can be very dense for somebody who is not a scientist, and it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who's not a scientist is not intelligent. It's just it's a different language, and so when you can, I guess, translate that scientific information to normal people who are not in that realm of science,
and giving them that information in a way that they can understand and apply practically, that's extremely valuable. And it's what makes things work. You know, I think that that's the work that you guys are doing and the work that we are doing here. I think it really works for this. It's like a common purpose. So that's great. Fantastic.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate that. I know we're coming up on time, and I want to be respectful of your time at work. But you know, I also can't think of a better way to close out our conversation. Francisco is really looking at cross collaboration inspired by food and knowledge and learning.
Correct.
Is there anything else I can ask or answer for you today? If not, you know, I want to extend my thank you to you for your time. So just want to give you one last shot if you have a question or anything.
No, my only comment is that I think that you guys are going to really like our presentation. I mean, sometimes when I give it, I don't know if it 100% resonates with a particular audience, but I think that in a sense you guys are like the ideal audience for this, and I'm really looking forward to it, and it should be a lot of fun. So, and I don't usually say that about presentations, but this should be a lot of fun.
Well, we're looking forward to you joining us, and thank you again for the opportunity to come and take your time to come speak to us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in April, all right?
Fantastic. See you then.